My Procreate Dreams video that I posted last week has more comments than any video in recent memory. Hello, my name is Brad, and at the time that I recorded that video, I only had about a day and a half to play around with the app before I actually started recording. Now I've had more time with it, and your questions have really informed me as to what you guys want to kind of know and understand. I got a lot of questions, so let's just dive into some of these. Number one, what iPad models will this work with? By far, this was the most asked question. So when I asked one of the reps at Procreate, hey, what iPads is this going to work on? They didn't have like a really solid answer for me. I think they're still figuring that out, what iPads they're going to support specifically. However, I definitely came away with a vibe that they're working on getting this running on more than just the latest M1 and M2 Pros. So if you do have an older iPad, or if you have an Air or a Mini, you're probably going to be okay. In fact, on Procreate's website where they talk about Dreams, they show an iPad Mini with this thing running on it. So I think they're hoping to get this running on as many iPads as they can. The second thing I got the most questions and comments about were specifically about frame-by-frame animation. I hope there's an intuitive workaround for frame-by-frame animation. Ideally, you'd be able to use the best of both. One thing I regretted after that video went out was how I framed that. At the very beginning of the video, what I said was this app reminds me more of Adobe After Effects than it reminds me of something like Adobe Animate. And I didn't word that nearly as well as I should have, because a lot of people left with the impression that this does not have frame-by-frame animation. I didn't focus on frame-by-frame animation because I thought that was the most boring thing about an animation app. Every app has that. And so I'll put it to bed now. Yes, this absolutely does have frame-by-frame animation. How do you get to it? If you pull down on the thing and you just go to drawing mode, this little flip book comes up. And that becomes your frame-by-frame animation tool. So what you can do there is you just draw on your canvas, you hit the next frame, you draw on your canvas again, hit the next frame, draw on your canvas again, and you can draw all the frames you want. Which brings me to another question. Does this have onion skinning? And the answer to that is also yes. If you tap on your little timeline numbers in the lower left-hand corner of your canvas, you're going to see some options there, including your onion skinning options. And if you look at the animations that Procreate showed off, many of those were using frame-by-frame animation. For example, Aaron Blaze's short, which if you haven't seen it yet, I'll link it down below in the description, is phenomenal. That was really exciting to see at the event because it really shows what someone who knows what they're doing can do with this app. The witch example that it shows throughout a lot of the demos and things like that, that has a lot of frame-by-frame animation in it as well. What they're doing is the broom is a frame-by-frame animation where the broom is moving a little bit, her hat's moving a little bit. That's another frame-by-frame animation that's just looping. And then all of those little loops are grouped together, and then they're moving that witch around and scaling her and changing things. So yes, frame-by-frame animation is in there, and it is just fine. Is there a text tool? Yep, there is a text tool. There is a circle next to the triangle. Is that the record button? So you can move the animation by hand live? Would be cool. Okay, so this might be the coolest feature in the app and something I did not cover in my original video. It was demoed to me over Zoom when we looked at it, but it didn't really sink in as to how cool this was until I actually saw the Procreate event and they demoed it there. So what that record button does is it's like a performance mode where you are performing your animation. Have you ever seen those crude animations where someone will just take a character in Photoshop and screen record and move the character around as it's talking? It's kind of like that, but really sophisticated. So as soon as you hit that record button, say you have a character in a layer, as soon as your pencil hits the canvas, it's going to start live recording your performance. So you can move that character across the screen. And if you let go of the screen, if you remove your pencil from the screen, it stops playing. It stops recording that performance. So you can move the character to the left and then think, okay, where do I want to go next? Okay, I'm going to move the character back. Super cool. The example they used live on stage was this bird. And what they had done is they used this scale effect on it, and then they turned on performance mode, and they had the bird kind of moving around and kind of going back around clouds, and I think that was it. It was so cool. There are a million ways to animate things. There are a million ways to draw things. Personally, I like to use the construction method. That's what I use in my course, Learn How to Draw in 60 Days. One day we're talking about figure drawing. The next day we move on to like stick figure poses. The next day we're talking about adding basic shapes to that. The next day character design. The next day details. There's a video and assignment for every every single day. Go at your own pace, geared towards beginners. bradsartschool.com if you'd like to learn more about that course and my other courses. Back to the questions. Another question, or maybe it was more like a feature request that I saw from a ton of people, was the ability to add bones or rigging. I'm genuinely blown away by this. I hope eventually they add some rigging or pin animation stuff to it. It doesn't look like they've done that just yet, but wow, the potential is here. Yeah, I haven't seen anything about rigging yet either, playing with the app or in the demo, so I don't think it's there yet, but this is just version 1. Software tends to be iterative, and they're probably just trying to get like the most basic version of this out there to test and see what people's workflows are, how are people using it, what are they using it for, and then they're going to tackle new features from there. The next batch of questions I'm going to tackle are a little bit over the place, but they're all generally about performance. This looks so good, I'm just wondering how many layers or how long of a video am I going to be able to get away with? Is that a valid question? I think that's a 100% valid question. Something I saw over and over again with many of these performance questions was about how Procreate itself works, the drawing app. The drawing app has been around for like 9 or 10 years. And so when it first started, iPads had very, very little memory. So what they did is they limited the number of layers based on how much RAM the iPad had. So you'd create your canvas, and then maybe based on your canvas size, you'd only have like 20, 30 layers to work with. And that kept the app from crashing all the time. Something Apple did, I think it was 2 years ago, is they opened up a lot of headroom on the iPad. Many developers were saying, we can't really do these pro level apps unless we can use more of the iPad's natural resources. I'm not talking about a cornfield. Basically, they have access to more of the RAM. They have access to more storage on the device itself to use as like almost like secondary RAM. It's technical. I don't fully understand it. But many of the bigger apps that have just been popping up in the last year or so, whether talking about DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut Pro, some of those video editing apps that just need more resources have been taking advantage of this. And it seems like Procreate Dreams is doing the same thing. One of the points of emphasis on the stage was this idea that the new file format for Procreate Dreams can make an image that is 1 million pixels wide by 1 million pixels tall. I don't know who would do that. I don't know what that's going to do to your storage, but you can do it. But I think the main reason they were talking about that is because the storage issues and the length issues that Procreate has had in the past aren't really going to affect this app because it's built in a different way. When I asked specifically if there were any limits to time, like is it a few minutes? Is it like 20 minutes? How big of a movie can you make? What I was told is it's unlimited. So if you want to make a 2-hour feature film in this thing, if your iPad can run it, you could do it. I didn't ask specifically about layers, but I would assume that if those other things are working, layers probably aren't going to be a limitation either. Another thing they said in the event is many of the things that they've learned building this app and some of the features that they have here, they're going to migrate over to Procreate proper. So both of these apps are going to be sharing those things. So I think, in fact, in recent years, it hasn't really been that big of an issue. Now that iPads come with much more RAM, the number of layers you can get in Procreate is in the hundreds, even with a large canvas. So it hasn't really been a problem. However, I wouldn't be surprised if that restriction is lifted in the near future. The other thing that surprised me is how you all reacted to the price. There were a couple people who said, oh, $20 is a lot of money. But for the most part, everybody was like, wow, that is a steal for what you're getting here. That was the general reaction. I would say 90% of the people who talked about the price talked about it in a positive light. Of course, the lack of subscription did not surprise me at all, but the $20, maybe I'm getting old here, but when the iPad Pros first came out and an app cost $5, people were like, $5, an app should be $1. And then as the price went to $10, people were like outraged whenever I covered an app that cost money. So the fact that this costs $20, which I personally think is cheap, the fact that the rest of you, not all of you, but many of you, most of you, think that sounds really cheap for what you're getting here really says something about where the ecosystem has come, where it's going, and just the quality of the stuff that Procreate's been doing over the years. Last question is, hope they don't neglect Procreate. I wouldn't worry about that. Many of the things they're developing here, they're going to move over to Procreate proper, the drawing app. Now, I want to be careful here because they're not going to be moving over the animation features. What they're going to be moving over are many of the under the hood things that they're doing, whether they're talking about their brush engines or the performance or the way it handles memory. I think those are the things that you're going to see in Procreate. So those aren't necessarily going to be things that you notice right away, but they're going to be performance things that maybe make things a little faster, maybe things run a bit better, maybe people who were bumping up against some of those limits in their animations with layers or that sort of thing in or the original version of Procreate are going to be able to take advantage of. That was the last question, but I do want to shout something out. If you're like, man, now I want to animate on the iPad, there's two other apps that I would kind of point you towards that I've talked about on this channel before, but it's been quite a while. One of them is ToonSquid, which is out now, and the other one is Calipeg, also out now. They do a lot of similar things, and they're really good animation apps on the iPad. So if you do have that itch and you don't want to wait until November 22nd, those are two apps to check out. I think they're both very good. Anyway, that is the video for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.